Hey, church. As we walk through the book of James, you are finding these imperatives, the things that James has called us to believe and to do. So today, Sam and I are going to talk to you about some things that we're trying to do and not always thriving at being doers of God's word. You've known us both for a number of years, so you may already be able to identify not only these, but other areas in which James calls us to obey the Lord, that we're not doing that. But as I work through it, I've been saying for a number of years that James 1:19, to be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger, is a verse that I really wish would mark my life, that doesn't necessarily mark my life. I remember sitting in men's Bible study years ago, just talking with some of the men in there about how common it is for us to struggle with this, but how much I deeply desired to be a parent, and my kids to say that I'm quick to hear, that I'm slow to speak, and that I'm slow to anger. And unfortunately, that's been years, and I don't think my kids are going to give me a passing grade on that one yet. God still needs to transform me in being quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. It's not what I'm good at. And as I walk through the diagnostic test of James 1, it's an area in which the Spirit needs to continue His work on me. So I say, pray for me. I say, let me know that when you see that out of me. And let that be hopefully a way in which you can examine your own self, not examining others. James doesn't tell us to look into the mirror for others. He tells us to look into the mirror for ourselves. So, Sam, you were talking a little bit about yourself and looking in the mirror of God's Word.
Yeah, similarly, this passage always is tough for me, both with speaking, but mainly being slow to anger. And that reminder, he says in verse 20, that for man's anger does not accomplish God's righteousness. I have to remind myself of that constantly. I often find myself being frustrated with having to do what I know to be right and being slow to act on what I know to be right. And it could be something simple as I'm being overly grumpy because I have to take the dog out again. Or I'm overly grumpy because I need to do the dishes. And it's getting in the way of me doing what I want to do, me sitting on the throne of my life and uh, decreeing throughout the land, that I don't need to do these things. And that's an impulse I think I've always dealt with. But I was reflecting on this exact thing in relationship to coaching basketball with the boys that Jason does such a great job head coaching, and I assist for a number of years. When trying to give boys wise counsel about how to be angry and do not sin in the world of sport, it is quite common to be fully angry and fully sinning in many, many ways. But when reflecting on that and being pricked to my own conscience, I need to be reminded that man's anger, an anger that is has man on the throne of his own life, does not accomplish God's righteousness. Thinking back to this kind of reversal that Jesus is talking about broadly in the Sermon on the Mount, and here James has a similar theme where it's like this sinful fallen version of this thing does not produce the unfallen godly version of this thing. And just that shocking reminder of the language there. I need to remind myself in this. In verse 21, he says, therefore ridding yourselves of all moral filth and evil. I don't like to think that my frustration at doing something simple that I should be doing as something that is morally evil and filthy. But God, who sees things clearly, sees them that way. And since He has made us first fruits of His creatures, I can actually take heart in putting away those things, even if they seem so simple. We all have seen how they have such dramatic consequences. We just don't always, in God's grace, reap what we've sown in those things. But Just a quick, concise, consistent reminder from James there that man's anger, sinful anger, doesn't accomplish God's righteousness. Putting away those things, however, receiving humbly the implanted word, will save you from those things.
Yeah. I appreciate Sam. I guess appreciate a little pricking of the conscience as you were talking about sport. And I guess that this means this even applies to my anger at officials missing calls, not accomplishing God's righteousness on that. So it may be a legitimate miss on their part, but it's probably not accomplishing God's righteousness when I get angry about it.
Definitely not the full beam, but a splinter off of the cross that we bear is dealing with the officials.
Yeah. So I don't know what it is for you, but living in a broken world, there are some things that are going to at times bring anger. Anger over brokenness, anger over sin is legitimate, but we need to be very careful recognizing that most of the things that we're angry about are preference issues, are priority issues, are not sin issues. And that when we're angry over the wrong things, we're not bringing God's righteousness. I think of Christ bringing God's righteousness while displaying anger over some things in the temple, and Christ's anger over sin. But unfortunately, as much as we want to tell ourselves that we're angry over sin often, that's not what we're finding ourselves angry over.
Yeah, and I find it often in my life and in seeing others that when we've been given over to such ready slights, when we're so quick to anger, many things that are not actual conflicts, are not actual sins, are not actual like offenses, tend to trick us, and we think that they are. They look like it to us because we've replaced some of the scales on our eyes. We've put on dirty glasses again. We've forgotten what we look like in the mirror, as James would say. And because we've forgotten that, we're also seeing unclearly.
And that goes back a little bit. You're using the language of seeing there, but I think of it from James' language, even of listening.
Yeah.
Listening and knowing the situation before quickly speaking or being prone to anger, and slowing down in that. James ends in chapter 1, though, or not the end, but in the passage towards the end of it, he talked about being blessed by looking to the perfect law of liberty, and doing it. It reminded me of Psalm 1. I want to conclude us today by just reading for you from Psalm 1 and asking you to let God probe your own heart for ways in which you need to be a doer who's blessed in your doing, whether that's in quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, or in another way from the diagnostic tests of God's word. But let's see how God blesses us as we strive to obey. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but are like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. And I'll read verse 1 for us one more time. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on it he meditates. Let's be a people who listen and meditate on God's word and are blessed as we do it.